1 week ago, Syracuse headed to Charlottesville for the biggest game of the season. A matchup with number 4 Virginia, a potential key pillar in an NCAA tournament resume. Instead, the Cavs blitzed the Orange, 6 straight goals to start the game, and a 19-12 victory for UVA. Now, SU's back is firmly against the wall. Number 2 Duke, on the road in the regular season finale. Must win if Syracuse wants any hope at the postseason. Coming up, we've got everything you need to know about the Blue Devils and Orange. It's Cuse Countdown. It starts right now.
Welcome inside the CitrusTV studios. Cuse Countdown is back. Chloe Smarz, Ethan Frank, and Jacob Morris talking the regular season finale for Syracuse men's lacrosse. The Orange heading down to Durham to take on number 2 Duke. But before we talk about the Blue Devils, well, I'm sorry, Syracuse fans, we've got to talk about the Orange and Cavaliers last week in Charlottesville. Everything went wrong for the Orange. Syracuse dropped an important must-win game against Virginia. Bad from start to finish. Ultimately, Virginia comes away with a win.
Yeah, Jacob, basically, Syracuse had to come into this game and play nearly perfect. You know what they did? They didn't do that.
It was definitely not perfect.
It was definitely not perfect. And that Syracuse defense was bombarded with shots from that Virginia offense, 60 in total. It led to 3 separate runs, a 6-0 run, a 4-0 run, another 4-0 run for Virginia, and Syracuse just couldn't come back after that. When Joey Spallini, your best player on offense, has just 1 assist on the game, you have no shot of winning.
The way Syracuse started the first half and the way Syracuse started the second half is a complete indictment on the coaching staff, because it is absolutely unacceptable that in the biggest game of your season, you go down 6-0, and then when you're within 5 at halftime, you let 3 goals for Virginia straight out of the locker room to put the game pretty much out of reach. Watching this contest, there was no time where you thought that Syracuse was going to win the game just because of how they started.
And that's really frustrating if you're a Syracuse fan, because again, it's an all-important game, a chance to maybe get back in the NCAA tournament picture. Instead, 6 straight off the rip for Virginia. Ultimately, the Cavaliers come away with the win. Far from perfect from the Orange is the theme, and well, turnovers a big reason for that. Giveaways for Gary Gate, a big reason why the Orange ultimately fell.
Then we turn the ball over and just not take advantage of the opportunities we got. So, hey, you know, that's what happens when you're a young team and you go in, you got to play a perfect game to beat a top 3 team, and unfortunately we didn't get it done today.
15 turnovers as a whole for Syracuse, but more importantly, in that disastrous first quarter, 6 of them for Syracuse, and it was sloppy mistakes, the type that you really don't want to see if you have any hope of taking down a team like Virginia. When you play like that, when you give the ball away, you're not going to give yourself an opportunity, Ethan, against the country's best.
No, not in the slightest. And we talked about earlier, if Syracuse was going to win this game, the Orange would have had to have been at their best or very close to their best. They were not, and it wasn't the number of turnovers, because 15 is not an outrageous number. But you look at guys who had multiple turnovers in this game. Cole Kirst with 4, Owen Hiltz with 2, Finn Thompson with a couple, and Alex Simmons with a pair as well. It just all started to snowball, and as Syracuse kept turning the ball over, it kept getting worse and coming at more inopportune times, exactly when Syracuse needed to string some goals together, and it just couldn't.
Well, after just 30 minutes of play, SU had taken 15 shots and turned it over 11 times. Again, not going to cut it against a team like Virginia, but are we really surprised here? I think we expected this to happen. It's been an issue for Syracuse all season. No surprise there. They needed to be perfect, and they haven't. They weren't against Virginia. Another
thing that hasn't been perfect for Syracuse all season long, well, let's stay negative. The face-offs. The Orange, between a 2-man tandem, currently 42%. That's 64th out of 72 Division I teams. Not great. Chloe, it's going to be an issue again this week against Duke. Face-offs have been, from start to finish, something that Syracuse has struggled with, and something that really the Orange haven't seemed to have an answer for all season long.
Yeah, they didn't have it against Virginia, but honestly, I thought it would have been a lot worse, but it wasn't. But then Syracuse still struggled, so there's no surprise there. But they don't have a reliable face-off man. That's been an issue. They should have known that coming into the season. They got someone like Will Mark through the transfer portal. They should have done that as well, because Fine and Recrusa, they're operating under 15% on the season. That's horrible, and when you play in the ACC, you need a a top faceoff guy. They don't have that. That's why they're losing games this season. That's why they lost against Virginia.
When you're going into a game and you know you're going up against a guy like P.D. LaSala, you have to have some sort of game plan that isn't, well, we're just going to roll with what we got because it's all we have. And one of my favorite sayings, hope is not a strategy. And that's really what Syracuse ran out against the Cavaliers, is just hoping there was some miracle from Jack Fine or Johnny Rachusa, and that just didn't happen. This is a guy in P.D. LaSala that dominated Syracuse twice last season and then put a beating on the Orange again on Saturday.
And it's something Syracuse has to fix pronto going into the Duke game. 21-9, the Orange fell in the face-off battle in the first matchup. But hey, let's talk something positive, and for that, let's go number 22, Joey Spallina. Came to Syracuse with all types of expectations, and Chloe, he's finally living up to them.
Jacob, everyone wants to live out their childhood dream. And for Joey Spallina, that dream was to play Division I lacrosse at Syracuse and wear the number 22 jersey. That jersey, the most famous one in the entire sport, hung in his room in Mount Sinai, New York, and that number on his back led him to become the nation's top recruit. A 3-time All-American, Long Island's all-time scorer, and the first high school lacrosse player to receive an NIL deal. So to say Spallina faced pressure is a bit of an understatement when he stepped foot on the turf for his first collegiate game. Spallina's first collegiate goal came late in the third quarter against Vermont. And while Spallina and the team celebrated his first goal in the team's opening win, it didn't come without criticism. Many fans questioning Spallina's performance after just going 1 of 15 from shooting. But Spallina would tell you himself, saying post-game he was just off at the attack. So how would he respond to those critics? Well, ironically enough, Spallina would shoot less in the next 2 games. Against UAlbany, he led the offense with 5 goals on 7 shots, propelling Syracuse to a 20-7 win. And it didn't just stop there. Back at home the following week, Spallina did it again against Holy Cross, scoring 5 goals for just the second straight game, which tied for the 6th most in a single game by a freshman. And it only took Spallina just 4 games to produce one of the flashiest goals in his Syracuse career. Fourth quarter against Maryland, defense collapsing behind the back, no-look goal for number 22. That would be Spallina's only goal of the game, but would lend him a spot on SportsCenter top 10. Despite a losing streak for the Orange following the loss to Maryland, Spallina's offensive attack never stopped. His 61 points already has him 6th on the Syracuse freshman scoring list and 18th in the nation in points per game. As the anchor of this Orange offense, Spallina leads this team in scoring, but most importantly, leads this team in assists. Last season, the Orange didn't have a number 22. And for Spallina, Jacob, this historic season has shown the power of the number 22 in Syracuse history for his selflessness, passion, and grit on the turf.
Spallina's been fantastic all season long. Syracuse is going to need him to be again against Duke this week. And coming up after the break, we talk about the Blue Devils, number 2 for a reason, revenge season. CC, back after this.
Everybody has a dream. Mine was to see the ocean. And with a little help, I made it.
Well, Welcome back to Cuse Countdown. Thanks so much for being with us. Chloe Smarz, Ethan Frank, and Jacob Morris. Before the break, we talked Syracuse, a whole lot of negatives, a positive at the end there with Joey Spallina. Now it's time to talk about the Blue Devils. And this is a team that Syracuse has seen before. Chloe, a 14-13 overtime loss for Syracuse when these two teams met. It was back and forth. Syracuse started quick. Duke came back. Syracuse sent it to overtime. Ultimately, the Blue Devils came away with a win.
Yeah, but Syracuse still played a really good game. So I looked at that game and I saw Will Marks' 22 saves. That's probably one of the best things we've seen from a college goalie all season, though. I'm positive for them, the goalie play. Negative, we have to bring it back to the faceoffs. Jake Naso had a 20-19 advantage on that stat line. That's also why Duke dominated the ground ball game 40-24. When you're getting killed in those ball possession statistics, you're going to have a hard time beating a team like Duke. They have to fix that again for this weekend.
And like Jacob mentioned, it was the first time really all season that Syracuse got off to a good start against a good team. And aside from a really tough third quarter that forced Syracuse having to rally, it was one of the most competitive showings we saw from the Orange all year against one of these top teams in college lacrosse. You think about the Maryland game, Syracuse wasn't really in that. The first time they played North Carolina, not really in that. We're behind to Hopkins a lot. But then in this Duke game, Syracuse was on top of its stuff and were able to keep it close, and unfortunately Charles Balsamo sent the Blue Devils home with a win.
Came away with an awesome game winner in the overtime period. And when you go macro and you look at Duke throughout this entire season, it's a really fascinating sort of entire season for the Blue Devils. Missed the NCAA tournament last year. When these two teams matched up, Syracuse and Duke, for round one, we really didn't know how good Duke could be. It just come off a loss to Jacksonville. Turns out the Blue Devils are pretty darn good. 11-2, 4-1 in conference, and have dominated all season long.
Yeah, and this is coming off a year in which the Blue Devils missed the NCAA tournament. This is a program, a head coach in John Danowski, the winningest head coach in the history of men's college lacrosse. So missing the NCAA tournament for a program like Duke is unacceptable. And to see how they've played this season, the only losses coming in that game against Jacksonville and then at Notre Dame a couple of weeks ago. Two huge wins over Virginia, beating teams like North Carolina, Denver, Penn along the way. It's been a huge bounce back year.
Yeah, there's a reason why they have 3 mid-season All-Americans. A few guys will mention in a bit. But it's no surprise. You have a top 5 scoring offense, a top 5 winning in face-off percentage. Obviously, they're going to be good. But especially after that overtime win against Syracuse, like you mentioned, it was big win after big win. Number 7 Loyola at the time, number 14 UNC, and number 3 Virginia. They've been on a tear throughout the season.
They've beat pretty much everybody they've faced. Duke's been fantastic. But Chloe, you mentioned top 5 face-off percentage, top 5 goals per game. Balance is the name of the game for this team. It's really a three-headed monster with the defense at the face-off X and on attack. That's a pretty good recipe. And when you start with one name, well, you've got to talk Brennan O'Neill, one of the best players in the entire country. Was number 1 overall in the class that Owen Hiltz was number 2 in, and he's playing like it right now at Tewaaraton Finals.
Yeah, he's the leader of this Duke offense. And against Syracuse, he's had their numbers. A hat trick in each of his 3 career games against Syracuse.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good, Ethan. Of his 38 goals this season, 27 of them have come on assists. That shows that he has the ability to create his own shot, and it's largely due to O'Neill's ability. Why this Blue Devils ranks 4th in the nation in scoring, averaging 15.6 points per game. To tell you how impactful he is on offense, he's just 6 points away from becoming the 15th player in Duke history to reach 200 points.
Yeah, and speaking with John Danowski this week, he told me that...
He told you?
Yes, he did. He told me that Brennan O'Neill is one of the most unique players that he's ever coached, that sometimes him and his coaching staff have to tell Brennan O'Neill, you need to shoot the ball more, that sometimes he's too unselfish, and that unselfishness hurts the team, that they want him to shoot more, be more aggressive, and his 38 goals this season, they speak for themselves.
Yeah.
He's been fantastic all season long. Top 5, or top 6 rather, in the country in points. But again, what makes this Duke team special is balanced, really good across the board. And then you go from attack to defense. Ethan, Kenny Brower, another Tewaaraton finalist. He draws every single tough assignment when Duke goes out and plays top teams. Held Connor Schellenberger 2 points under his season average, and he should pose issues for Syracuse again this week.
Yeah, a senior from Long Island, which I'll admit is not my favorite island. That would be the island of Kaho'olawe. Olave, but Kenny Brower is a guy that he has 5 games with multiple caused turnovers. He's been an absolute menace. And you talked about a guy like Connor Schellenberger for Virginia, another Tewaaraton finalist, a guy who's been at the top of the polls in terms of maybe winning that award along with Brennan O'Neill. And for Brower to shut him down not once, but twice is really, really impressive, and why Duke has been such a good team this season.
Yeah, and Schellenberg the week before that had a 7-point performance against Notre Dame that led him to ACC Player of the Week. But if you look at him overall defensively, Brower ranks 2nd on the team with 12 caused turnovers and is 4th among non-faceoff specialists with 27 ground balls. It's a pretty good thing, Ethan. And he has at least 1 ground ball in 10 games, has recorded at least 1 caused turnover 6 times. A 2-year captain, has started every single game for Duke in his career. You can't really ask for much more.
That's a lot of accolades.
That's a lot of accolades.
Whole lot of starts as well. So good at the face-off X, or rather we're going to get to that. Good in defense, good on attack. And the last part, I teased it a little bit there. Good at the face-off X. Jake Naso, 5th in the country in face-off win percentage at 63%. Tops in the ACC. And we talked about it a little bit before. Quite frankly, killed Syracuse in the first matchup. 21-9, Duke won the face-off battle. Could be tough once again.
Yeah, to put it simply, Ethan, he's really good. I mean, he's winning.
How good? Put it in comparison for me.
He's just really good, Ethan. He's winning 63% of his face-offs. A guy that has Naso's numbers from a week ago, Petey LaSala, he basically almost destroyed him his entire career. Against Virginia, though, he was able to beat him. He won 21 of the 32 face-offs. His ground ball game is also phenomenal. He's picked up 380 ground balls in his career. He's a guy that Syracuse is really going to have to watch out for.
He's 63% on the season, which is elite. First in the ACC by nearly 8% over Petey LaSala, and they have the same amount of attempts. So it's not like Naso's taken fewer attempts and won more. They've taken the same amount of attempts, and he's won 8% more face-offs than the second place guy. And he's not just a face-off guy. He scored 4 goals this season, assisted on 3 more, picked up 112 ground balls, 70% against Syracuse, like you were talking about, Chloe. He is a really, really impressive player. And with Syracuse's face-off struggles, like we've seen all season, it came back to haunt him against Virginia. It's likely to do the same against Duke.
It's hard to overstate just how important that matchup is. Syracuse bottom 8 in face-off win percentage. Jake Naso top 5. Those are 2 not exactly numbers you'd want to see if you're Syracuse fans. Numbers you don't want to see also if you're an Orange fan. 7-0 at home for Duke. The Blue Devils have been dominant in Durham. Non-stop, 7.5 goals winning per average each time they play in Durham. Duke's been unstoppable at home.
Well, maybe it just means if you're a Syracuse optimist that they're due for a loss at home. Like, this is a Duke team, and as someone who's been to Koskinen Stadium, I can say the environment there is unlike any other in college lacrosse. It is a really, really passionate home fan base. You can see Cameron Indoor Stadium from the bleachers. That just gives it a very historic feel, a big-time moment, a big-time atmosphere, and that's why Duke is so dominant.
Yeah, they've outscored their opponents at home 118-65. They've had big wins at home. Again, Virginia, we talked about UNC Loyola. 7-0 at home. You can't really ask for much more if you're Duke. A scary stat line for Syracuse going down there this weekend.
Those 2 losses, Jacksonville and, of course, Notre Dame, both on the road. Syracuse has to go on the road at Duke and come away with a big win. But it's time for another break here on Cuse Countdown. When we come back, we have some fun. CC Superlatives. We're pulling out the yearbook. Don't go anywhere. Cuse Countdown. Back after the break.
Welcome to my house. Lately, not my happy place. Everybody's pretty tired of each other. The parents were not themselves. My little brothers were morphing into small creatures. The walls were closing in. Clearly a case of too much family, too close, 24/7. And there's a lot of that going around right now. If this sounds like your house, try going someplace new. YourLifeYourVoice.org. You'll find lots of ideas to help you handle the family stresses of being confined to close quarters. YourLifeYourVoice.org. It might not get you out of the house, but it could help you find a little more breathing room.
Hey Bobo, do trees tell each other stories?
I'm sorry, I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, why don't we go find out? Listen.
Do clouds take naps?
I couldn't tell you.
stars visit their friends?
Look!
Welcome back inside the Citrus TV studios. Cuse Countdown is back. Chloe Smarz, Ethan Frank, and Jacob Morris. And we're about ready to have some fun. CC Superlatives. We're pulling out the yearbook. It's the regular season finale for Syracuse. The Orange going down to Durham to match up with Duke, so we got to figure out superlatives. Who's going to be the best for the Orange? And we begin with the biggest newcomer, best newcomer. Chloe, there's been a whole lot of faces. You could go freshman, you could go the transfer portal. Who you got?
I'm going to go freshman here. I've already talked a lot about him on the show, but #1 recruit Joey Spallina has by far been the best newcomer for Syracuse. He's living up to all the hype that was coming out of high school. He's done everything. He's leading this offense. He has 61 points already. That has him 6th on the freshman scoring list for Syracuse. He's 18th in the NCAA in points per game. That's the highest scoring for a freshman in the country by a wide margin. He's also leading Syracuse in terms of assists, which is super important when you want to dish out passes to people like Michael Leo and Alex Simmons. It's made Syracuse effective on offense. And without Joey Spallina, I don't really know if Syracuse would be so impactful this year when it comes to scoring.
Well, if we're doing best newcomer, if we're doing biggest newcomer, then that helps my case because I got Will Mark. Will Mark's a pretty tall guy, so if we're doing biggest newcomer, then that is huge for me. But you look at this guy, he's the only Tewaaraton finalist on the team. I don't think Joey Spallina is a Tewaaraton finalist, is he? No, he isn't. So that would be pretty good for Will Mark's case. 11.65 goals allowed per game. He has over a 55% save percentage, averages over 14 saves a contest. That's the most in the ACC by over 2 saves a game. And he's playing the most difficult position on the field in front of a defense that has done him absolutely no favors. Look at the talent that Joey Spallina has around him, and then you think about Will Mark. Has this defense been good? I would say the talent around Joey Spallina is much better than what Will Mark has in front of him.
Both good answers, but that's a key point by you. The defense has struggled. Will Mark has rescued that unit a whole lot this season, including in round 1 against Duke with 22 saves. But hey, let's go from positive to negative. Ethan, I ask you, who's been the biggest disappointment this season for Syracuse?
I think you're going to like this one, Jacob. I'm going with Dave Petromala and his defense.
Right answer.
This Syracuse defense has been incredibly disappointing. I just talked about how Will Mark has so much on his plate, and with Dave Petromala, there's the promise of coming in, a championship-level head coach, being a defensive coordinator, and he hasn't met expectations because continually Syracuse has to outscore teams to win games. Rarely do you get a good defensive performance from Syracuse that leads to a win. It always has to be a hero-type offensive output that leads to a win for Syracuse. I need to see more from Dave Petromala because this offense has developed a lot faster than this defense, and that's on the coordinator.
I'm going to go face-offs here, Ethan. We've talked about it all show, but when you knew last year Jacob Fopp, your #1 guy for face-off, is going to leave, you had to be able to prepare yourself for this season. You look at Jack Fine, didn't have a lot of experience last year. Then you look at Rachusa, who came from the MAC conference. No disrespect to the MAC conference.
It sounds like you're disrespecting the MAC.
A little bit. It ain't anything like ACC lacrosse. They've only won 151 face-offs out of 357 attempts. This is something that the coaching staff should have looked at through the transfer portal like they did with someone like Will Mark, or they needed to recruit better because this has been an issue the entire season for Syracuse. It hasn't been fixed. It's why they're losing games, and it's a big issue for them, big disappointment for the Syracuse team overall.
I like how you mentioned Will Mark again.
Yeah, I
Will Mark's
like
pretty
that.
darn good. Syracuse looked at the face-off issue and kind of just wrote it out. It's proved to be a negative for the Orange so far. But hey, let's switch back to the positive side, encapsulating the entire season. Chloe, give me your MVP for this team.
I'm going to say it again.
All right.
Take a guess here.
I'm guessing number 22.
It is number 22, Joey Spallina.
All
Again,
right.
He lived up to all the hype that he came into Syracuse with. Out of the top, bear with me here, the top 50 Division I lacrosse players in regards to points per game, Joey Spallina is the only freshman to come in this ranking at 20th in the nation. If Spallina wasn't on this team, Owen Hill to be the next Syracuse player listed at 55th in the country. So Spallina has produced so much offense for this team. I know the defense has been a problem, but he's been so effective on offense, dishing it out to other players, helping them score points as well, and then what he's done obviously for himself in terms of points and goals per game.
So I like your Spallina pick, and yes, he's had a great season, especially for a guy getting acclimated to the college game. But how, when you say most valuable player, value
Let me guess.
is what I'm going with here. And that is, once again, Will Mark, because we talked about all of Syracuse's issues this season. And when I think most valuable player, I think if you remove this player from the team, it would have the biggest impact. If you took Will Mark off this Syracuse team, there would be no player who would have a bigger impact if they were not on the field. And that's why he gets my choice for most valuable player. He's the only Tewaaraton finalist that I mentioned. And, you know, he just has a bigger impact than Spallina because of the talent that is around him, unlike number 20.
Fair point. Fair point.
Hey, two
I'll give
good
that.
picks regardless, but I don't think you can argue with a Tewaaraton finalist. Even with how good Joey Spallina has been as a freshman. But it's time for one final break here on Cuse Countdown. When we come back, we break down the season as a whole, and we've got predictions for the Orange and Blue Devils in Durham. Welcome back to Cuse Countdown, wrapping up shot Syracuse and Duke in the season finale for the Orange. And when looking at the season in its entirety for the Orange, it's been a lot of improvement because, quite frankly, the Orange had one of the worst seasons in program history a season ago. 4-10 in 2022. The Orange 8-6 currently. Chloe, it's been we'll say not night and day, but it's been different from the Orange, and got to take positives in year 2 of the Gary Gate era.
Yeah, I mean, obviously coming off of a 4-10 season, the worst in program history, how could it really get much worse? You have improvements with the recruiting class that came in, with Spallina, with Thompson. There's nothing really else you can ask for them. But look at the obvious flaws here. The defense, like you talked about, the face-off, stuff that needed to be addressed before the season even started. They're going to miss out on the tournament for a second straight year. That's a bit of disappointment, but they have a lot of youth on this team that I think can help this Syracuse program get back to where they used to be.
Yeah, this is not the year that Syracuse gets to the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
Not even close. They're climbing the mountain right now, and it's good to say that if last year was rock bottom, that Syracuse has made substantial improvements here in year 2 under Gary Gate, and that's nothing but an accomplishment. Albeit there are some flaws, obviously, with the roster, with the player development, with whatever. It has still been an improvement, and you have to give them credit for that.
And I think the positive you take away from everything is the development of the freshmen. It was all about the young talent, a couple of transfer portal ties. Gary Gate's done a good job, at least on attack, Chloe, of taking care of that.
One moment, Jay.
Yeah, hold on a second here, Jacob. We just wanted, before we got into our predictions for the show, we wanted to thank you. This is your last Cuse Countdown. You've been on air for 6 semesters. You're a producer for a year. You've been instrumental to both of us here, and you've just meant so much to us here in our time at CitrusTV.
I've told you this before, but you're the best person I've met at this station. You're an even better person outside of here, and that's what makes you so special. Another big thanks to our technical director, Ryan Nelson. This is his final show. Thank you for all you have done at Syracuse and at CitrusTV. You are truly the heart of the station.
Unexpected, not in the rundown, but thank you guys both so much. It's very kind. This show's meant a whole lot to me. I know it's meant a whole lot to Ryan as well. But the audience members, guess what? They don't care about that. They care about Duke and Syracuse. So, Ethan, I'll come back to you after you took things off the rails. Blue Devils and Orange, Saturday, regular season finale for the Orange. Score prediction from Durham.
The Orange aren't going to get it done. Chloe said this team has no shot at making the NCAA tournament. They do have a shot, and it's if they win this game convincingly against Duke that tells the committee, okay, we just beat one of your top 3 teams in the RPI. We deserve to be in this tournament. But I don't see that happening. 17-12, I've got the Blue Devils taking down the Orange. Brennan O'Neill is too good. His supporting cast is too good. We talked about Kenny Brower, Jake Naso earlier. John Danowski, too good of a head coach. He'll have his guys motivated, ready to play. It's rest versus rust for Duke coming off a bye week. I like rest in this game, especially playing at home.
I'm going to agree with you here, Ethan. I got Duke as well, 15-9. Second matchup of the year. I don't think Duke's going to lose for the second time. Also, down in Durham, like we talked about, 7-0 on the road. I don't like that if you're Syracuse. Jake Naso has Syracuse's number. He's a really good guy, and you know who's not? Jack Fine and Johnny Rachusa, so they're going to have a hard time against him. I like Duke. I like the Blue Devils. Syracuse is going to lose for the second straight time this year to close off the year.
Before we go, if you have a key for Syracuse, if the Orange have any hope, you're both negative, and I completely get that. What do the Orange have to do to get the win?
They can't get off to as slow a start as they did against Virginia because that game was pretty much over as soon as you're down 6-0. So you can't spot Duke any goals because of how talented they are.
And they're going to have to control the face-off. We've talked about it all show, but if they don't do that, if they don't even compete with Jake Naso, they're going to have a hard time getting those offensive possessions, and it's going to be playing a lot of catch-up after that.
All right, that's the roadmap for Syracuse, but that's all the time we have on Cuse Countdown. Chloe Smarz, Ethan Frank, and Jacob Morris saying so long, and thank you so much.